Like, I think any healthy product team is built on partnership. And I think that it's a partnership between product and agile, partnership between product and engineering, product and design. I mean, it's really trying to ensure that we've got this unified mentality. And for me, they're partners. So I've got partners in crime.
Welcome to the Product Agility Podcast, the missing link between agile and product. The purpose of this podcast is to share practical tips, strategies, and stories from world-class thought leaders and practitioners. Why, I hear you ask? Well, I want to increase your knowledge and your motivation to experiment so that together we can create ever more successful products. My name is Ben Maynard, and I'm your host. What has driven me for the last decade to bridge the gap between agility and product is a deep-rooted belief that people and products evolving together can achieve mutual excellence.
And you join us for episode 2 with CP Richardson, Jenny Czaja, and myself, Ben Maynard, where we pick up from where we left off at the end of last week's episode, talking about strategic bets, how the role of product owner or product manager is really a form of gambling. We look at the relationship within ArcXP between their product managers and their support mechanisms, the agile coaches and scrum masters, and how they've made it a success. We even suggest, based upon Jenny and CP's experience, what could be an alternative job title for a scrum master. Before the episode begins, I'd like you to make a little note of the person that you think may benefit from listening to this episode. There's a lot of golden nuggets as always, so please do feel free to recommend this to somebody that you know and shout about it on LinkedIn, particularly at me. If you have some feedback, come and find me. I'm always willing to have a conversation, and nice conversations, interesting feedback will always result in some kind of shout out. So if you want to get your name mentioned on here, hunt me down. So let's not listen to me anymore. Well, not just me. Let's get on with the episode.
So, question to you both. Within ArcXP, the relationship between kind of product and the agile teams, how is that relationship working at the moment? I'd be really interested to hear about the handoffs and what the team's getting, and any color on that would be really fascinating.
We recently kind of reimagined the way Agile operates at Arc. We had dedicated Scrum Masters previously, and we kind of shifted towards more of a model like program management. We have some folks focused on program management and some focused on more agile coaching. And so that's how we've operated. For example, my team just had a retro yesterday, and one of our agile coaches led that retro. So facilitating that conversation, and she's kind of working across different teams and identifying any areas of friction, and then raising those areas of friction up the chain to try to figure out how we can minimize that, how we can ensure that folks are being able to develop in an environment where they feel fully invested and supported, and also so they feel really bought into the mission. I would say we're in this like transition period with Agile a little bit, CP. So I'd love to hear from your perspective too, because it's changed recently in the last couple months.
August-ish of last year.
Oh gosh, it's already been that long.
It's been a while. Like when I really thought, I was like, oh snap, we've been doing this thing for a little bit now. From the switch, from a program management perspective, I think it helps tremendously. And I think the relationships that we are able to cultivate within the organization from a program management standpoint. When I say program management, we're looking at longer than your 3 months or 4 months effort. We're looking at like maybe half year, large types of efforts that are going to impact the entire platform. That will fall under our portfolio of things that we would manage and handle, mainly because A, they go for so long. B, there's so many different people and engineering teams that are involved in the entire process to make something real across a platform. I think from my perspective, it is going well. I think we have some opportunities, at least on our side, I would say, because I like to do a lot of self-reflection, and that is trying to figure out how to best ask when things can get done, knowing that engineering teams are balancing a bunch of other stuff that are in their portfolio that folks are asking, right? So are getting really good and getting really crisp of what our strategic ask is from a program management standpoint. I think there's some improvements that we can do there, but I think overall it has been going well. From the agility perspective, I have so many thoughts. I have all of the thoughts because, Ginny, just from your example earlier, if we're not empowering teams to change what their worlds look like today on their own, I feel like we are doing a disservice to our engineering teams, because you should be able to, hey, there's this issue that we need to hash out individually that may not necessarily have to do anything with the platforms or with other teams, because that's a different story. That requires a very deliberate conversation when it comes to upstream and downstream dependencies or impacts. That's a different conversation. But if it's hey, let's work on the friction internally with your teams, and we have to have an agile coach come in and facilitate that conversation, I feel like we have done a disservice to those engineering teams. And it empowers the teams to work through and resolve those issues on their own. Our approach, though, it is good because it gives our agile coaches the ability to actually coach and not be dedicated solely to a team, which is really cool. I think we miss the hand and glove service that we provide to teams when you have a dedicated Scrum Master. But similar to as we talked about very early on, we got to scale. We're not going to be able to scale and have every Scrum Master on every team. That's just not how it works, right? But we have to give the teams the tools, the tips, the techniques, the ability, and the empowerment to resolve issues on their own. It's progressing, but I think if you ask if we're there yet, I would say not yet, but we're on the path.
That's interesting, CP. It's funny because I would say my team, I think, is very self-organized. And I think, what's nice about the way that we're structured at ARC is that every product team, we've got dedicated developers focused on a particular part of the product platform. And each team is led by a product manager, an engineering manager, and a designer. So I am basically attached at the hip with Caitlin Trickey and Marissa Halpert, my incredible designer and engineering manager partner. And I think we set the tenor and tone for the team. And we are working so collaboratively with the developers in terms of making sure this is the experience that they want this to be. And I think what I was saying about Remy coming in and joining our retro and facilitating that retro is she's getting a bird's eye view of each of the teams. And I think one thing that I appreciate is I know we have a very healthy team, and I'm very appreciative of my very healthy team and my little crew on Composer. I think what Remy's trying to identify is the patterns too, right? It's like, well, this team seems to be able to work on this pretty efficiently. How do we scale that process that they've developed internally, and how do we bring that to other teams across the organizations? I think right now the effort is trying to identify some best practices and bring those at scale. It's less managing, this is how the team has to do this. I think we're still pretty self-managed. So for that, I think we're empowered and I really appreciate it.
So the Agile coach is more akin to pollinator.
Yeah, that's a nice way to put it. I like that. Like CP said, it's still something that I think we're in transition with. We're still figuring it out.
There is a reasonably tried and tested pattern of, say, not agile coaches per se, but Scrum Masters serving 1 to 3 teams. Whenever I've worked at scale, very rarely has it ever been a 1-to-1 basis because one, it isn't efficient or effective really. And when teams become mature, there's not a whole heap of stuff you can do 8 hours a day with a single team. And actually seeing different teams in different areas of the product across different parts of a tech stack, perhaps they work, the ideas they've got, and see those opportunities is fascinating. I think the one thing that I've always tried to avoid is to have those people become the ones responsible for making sure that those ideas are listened to or spread elsewhere, and rather what can you get to have that happen organically or have that person facilitate the conversations. And I think that becomes a really different gig to maybe what one team coach or one team Scrum Master had, because it isn't like you're just there helping a team and helping them go where they need to be. It's actually you're saying you're trying to pick up, well, what's interesting and relevant from this team, what's interesting and relevant from this team, and how do I then set a conversation between these things which I think are interesting and relevant. And that's a different level of coaching skill and prowess, I think, that's needed to really make that succeed. And that's one of the hallmarks of a really good agile coach or Scrum Master in my books, is the ability to do that.
Being part of an organization that actually had a one-to-one relationship, which is the only organization that I was ever a part of, which is National Public Radio or NPR here in DC, I would disagree. Ben, I know it's surprising to us disagree on stuff, but having the one-on-one time with your team to really get into what exactly is happening, what's going on, instead of sprinkle a little Scrum, sprinkle a little Kanban, some XP techniques, sprinkle some Agile, remind them what the principles and the values are, and then, oh yeah, by the way, I got another stand-up in 10 minutes, so can we hurry this up? I don't know, because like through my experience in that one-on-one relationship, I was actually able to understand all the different patterns, behaviors, and approaches for each individual team member, and actually come up with customized coaching plans or approaches for that team overall, and better assess where they're at from their maturity standpoint. Yes, every team wants to be a mature Agile team, of course. About 0.0000002% of those teams are actually that. Right?
That's a lot of zeros, man.
Shame the devil told the truth, as my mom always says. Shame the devil told the truth. But being there with that team on a regular basis, understanding what's happening, what's going on, and seeing all of the external forces that are being placed on that team because I'm just with them regularly is an experience that I would not trade for anything, because I was able to see the entire ecosystem from that team's perspective. And it helped me better understand, okay, who is pulling this team in different directions? How can I best support my product owner in the things that they need? What can I do to make sure that they are successful in their role, and not just on the development team? Because as Scrum Master, it's just really easy to just, oh, it's always the development team that needs help. Sometimes it's the product owner that needs the help, because sometimes that product owner is brand new to that role and is really good at being a subject matter expert in, I don't know, Web3, but they have no clue how to actually figure out how to work with the team and share their vision across the development team. That's where the Scrum Master comes in and actually helps the product owner. I cannot tell you how many product owners that I have helped that are really sharp and really smart, but just to have that opportunity and that time with them, I'm not saying that you're wrong. I just respectfully disagree.
Hey. All right, CP, here we go. I'm going to segue this a little bit, right? But also give my responses. So to clarify, I wasn't saying that every Scrum Master or coach should have multiple teams. And I wasn't saying that it should only ever be a one-to-one. I think that depending upon where the team is, that over time they shouldn't need full-time support. I mean, that's something we can agree on, right? And
I would agree with that for sure.
Yeah, agree.
And CP, I agree with you. Everything you said, I totally agree with. Sometimes teams need one-on-one. Sometimes they just get bored of you and they're doing a great job, so they don't need you as much. And one of the anti-patterns I've always seen is when that Scrum Master is then elevated to Scrum Master Manager. Rather than then say take on another team, which is within their capacity and they can help, they get elevated to a manager who then manages the Scrum Masters rather than actually being a Scrum Master. And that's dangerous ground. And I know this is something which was spoken about in another episode with a gentleman from a company called PandaDoc, who the Scrum Masters who were the most experienced, they decided they would call them the heads of Agile practice for their respective product areas. And they were like, and Dennis, when I was talking to him, said, we're just Scrum Masters. I still have a team I work with. I just am also a mentor and manager of the other Scrum Masters too. He said, but I just get really tired when they keep on asking me, how do I become head of Agile practice? And he's like, look, I'm just a Scrum Master. Like, I'm not any different from you at all. Yeah, I mentor you and I manage you, but I'm not this big, lofty head of Agile practice. I'm just a Scrum Master still. And they've got a great, strong Scrum Master community and mindset in there. And I feel maybe they got spoiled a little bit because they gave it this other job title. I think there are great opportunities there. And the one thing I'm then wondering, and Jenny, you kind of maybe answered a little bit of it when you said that you had a Scrum Master who was a shoulder to cry on for you in the past. But then spending time with a team and seeing how they operate is really important. I don't think you can coach a team that you can't see doing the work.
Absolutely.
At least not effectively. From a remote working perspective, how have you found the ability to do your job as part of a team well, and secondly, then any coaching kind of support that's been made available to you in that remote setting?
Oh, that's a great question. One thing that I thank my lucky stars for frequently is that actually, even before COVID, ARC was predominantly a remote workforce. So we actually were in an organization that sort of had figured this out before they had to figure it out on the fly. And so that is something that I'm very grateful for. And I think today, it's 80% of ARC employees are remote and the other 20% are based in the DC headquarters of the Post. So we were already, I think, prepared to be a remote culture and prepared to have dispersed teams. So for me, how to do this effectively, I certainly try to spend a lot of time with my teams. I try to have a lot of one-on-ones too, just to have those opportunities to connect interpersonally. We have monthly team happy hour socials where we'll play Among Us or something and just kind of get together and goof off and blow off steam for a little while. But in terms of the coaching practices, I've certainly gotten some of that support from the Agile team, and my prior Scrum partner, Derek, was somebody who was really coaching me through a number of different issues. He and I would have regular coaching sessions. He's an incredible person. But for me, especially, how can I make sure that everybody feels bought in? How can I make sure that everybody feels included and heard and aligned on what it is that we're working towards? So I would get support from that. And obviously, certainly from my managers. I have incredible managers. My manager, Kirti, and our VP, Mike, they're just phenomenal. And they are very focused on growing their people. I think it's really important in any organization, honestly, to have managers that are focused on the people element and have managers that are focused on cultivating and nurturing leaders and individuals to better empower their teams.
Building capability.
Exactly.
Yeah. I know. It's so nice to hear. The interesting thing is often people say, well, what does a manager do in that kind of agile environment or a good product environment or somewhere that's trying to embrace product agility? Well, they help increase the capability, but not of the individuals, but of the system. And it isn't a case of looking at that you can't increase everyone's individual capability and expect magically for everything else to be great. You have to kind of take a more of a systemic view. And it's just so nice to hear you say that. What was also really nice to hear you say, and CP, I don't know what you think about this, Scrum partner.
I heard that. I was just like, interesting.
Yeah.
I'm like, I like that.
Yeah, I know. I think it's got legs.
I'm like, I can get down with that.
I would say, I mean, for me, I think that I think any healthy product team is built on partnership. And I think that it's partnership between product and agile, partnership between product and engineering, product and design. It's really trying to ensure that we've got this unified mentality. And for me, they're partners. So I've got partners in crime.
No, for me, I think you've kind of solved a long-standing problem with the name of Scrum Master.
Scrum partner, Agile partner.
Well, no, I think there's some...
No. Oh, yeah, this is my absolute... That's coming out. It has to be Agile partner because Scrum's a framework. Ooh.
Agile partner, I like it.
Partner, you have a Scrum partner.
Scrum is a framework for what?
If you check for the word Agile in the Scrum guide, it is nowhere in the guide.
Well, of course, because then they
Fun fact of the day.
But then they couldn't sell as much Agile if they... Because it's Scrum if they put the word Agile in there. There was that old story, but I don't know how true this is, but the reason it wasn't called Adaptable was because Jim Highsmith had just released a book called that, Adaptive Software Development. And they said, if we called it Adaptive or something, then Jim's going to get all the business, so we've got to call it something else. I don't know how true that is. But no, I think like this idea of my question is, what is Scrum a framework for? I think Scrum is a great framework for making teams, good teams. I think it's really good for that. I think on its own, to pick up our earlier point, I think it really sucks at creating great products because it gives you absolutely no guidance in what is a good product or what techniques might be useful or anything like that. It's the stuff you add to Scrum which makes it good for making products. But what Scrum is, what's built in there, it gives you a team coach. It lets the teams reflect periodically. It asks them to work in teams. It asks them to minimize their dependencies. That is incredibly valuable. And I think it's wonderful for that. But on its own, for making great products, I would disagree.
I don't know, because you think, because now we're about to go into the guide. Because when you think about the pillars of Scrum, transparency, adaptation, and inspection are all about product management.
No,
how do you know you make a good product?
I know, but like that's all about empirical process control and all of that. It's just what people did long before Scrum, right? And you could say that about anything. But if you look at just for names of things, right? So when we think about Scrum, and as somebody that has been seen for a long time as a big advocate of Scrum, I'm not Scrum bashing. I'm sharing my honest thoughts on it, is that the team retrospective, I think, is great. And they think, let's be retrospective about the team. Let's figure out how we want to improve. And I like that. And then we call it a sprint review, which is just a really terrible name. You're not reviewing the sprint in its entirety, are you? Because you don't talk about how the team's worked. You're not reviewing the sprint. At best, you're reviewing the increment. But then reviewing an increment, what does reviewing something give you? If you think of a movie review, right? You want a written thing about how good that increment was? It just, like increment retrospective sounds, for me, more in line with what you want to be doing in the sprint review, which is really inspecting the increment, figuring out what was good, what was bad, new ideas. So increment retrospective, I think, is 1,000,000 times better than sprint review. And this continues to build my argument that Scrum on its own as a framework for creating great products just hasn't got enough there. I mean, it hasn't got enough there. If it's one team, maybe if you've got a great product person, but it doesn't give you enough guidance on the other areas. But for helping create brilliant teams, right, there's a whole heap of stuff there, and it's fantastic for that.
I would say like each part. So I forgot when the latest variation of this guy came out. I want to say it was like 2018, 19. I gotta look it up specifically, where they added in like that specific section with the product vision.
Yeah,
really emphasizing that because they're like, oh yeah, we're maybe lacking in this aspect a little bit. So let's talk about a little bit more about on the product part of it, making sure that the vision is clear and everybody understands it. Again, which is something that they probably should have did a long time ago. But what they tried to do early on was the product backlog is what some instructors said. The product backlog is supposed to be your vision. Like, no, the product backlog is the most, at the top of the list, the most valuable things that people want to get done in the next sprint. Tells a pseudo kind of story, but I'll look at a Jira backlog. I can't tell you what the vision is. I just see a bunch of stuff that is haphazardly written, and I don't know what needs to get done. That's not a vision.
The backlog is not a vision. The backlog is
the backlog is not a vision. It's a place where things go to die.
That's also, that's also true.
So I'm curious then, if we think about backlog and we extrapolate that up and we talk about vision, and earlier we spoke about roadmap as well. How many teams are working in ArcXP?
Oh gosh, CP, I think we've got at least 20 product teams. Does that sound right?
I know it's in the 20s now, whether it's 20 or 27, but it's in the 20s.
That's a good number of teams.
It's solid size.
Yeah, no,
it's solid.
It's a big practice.
Yeah, like shit don't get any easier the more you add. And then that's
it does not.
That's a decent number. And each of those teams then have, from a structural perspective, Jenny, each team has a Jenny? Or
yes. Each team has a product manager.
They're called product managers. Sorry, not Jenny's. Sorry.
Yes, or me. That also works. So each team has a product manager and then an engineering manager and a designer. The engineering managers and designers are sometimes spread across teams.
Okay, nice. Okay, now I can see that structure. And the teams you'll work on Composer, and then there are other teams that also work on kind of customer relevant parts of the platform. It's not like you have a team that are working like, we're front end, or we're API, or we're data. So you have teams that are focusing on customer relevant pieces of functionality. Fantastic.
That's actually, now I think, I was like, God, that is really awesome, because like an entire tool such as like WebScan, for example, it has front end, middleware, back end, and it's through and through. Like, I've been in organizations where you have your front end teams and you have your back end teams, and it's just like, oh snap, Arc is structured really freaking well. Whoever had insight into that.
It is. I would say it also means that I work exclusively with full stack developers, which are basically like the wizards of the software world. They're hard to find. That's the one thing. So that's the one catch.
Yeah. No, I think that's powerful. It's really powerful. I mean, this is what I suppose historically were called feature teams, in the kind of evolving nomenclature of it. People referring to it as product teams, but this idea that you have, let's say, like engineering, design, product, really powerful to have that share between teams. Then above the product managers, is it another person or more people? Because what I'm trying to understand is you've got your overall vision, I'm assuming, for ArcXP.
Sure.
And then that gets delivered then by other teams, and you've got a roadmap. So how is all of that, some voguing, and how is all that like structured?
Sure. I'm happy to talk through the structure. So Arc, I agree. I think we have a very well-structured product organization. And that was actually something that attracted me here, because I like the way that each of the teams are empowered, and I like the way that we've thought about it. There are 3 pillars to the Arc product organization. There is one that is all around content, and that's the team that I'm on. It's tools designed for people that are actually managing content. So for me, that's Composer, that's the authoring tool. It's also Photo Center, which is how people are managing photo assets. It's Video Center, how people are managing video assets. It's WebSched, which CP mentioned, which is our web scheduling tool, which is how folks are planning how they're going to deliver their content online. And then I roll up to my group product manager, Kirti. She is responsible for the vision for all of our content creator tools. Then there is another team that is focused on, we call it the experience team. And that team is focused on tools for users that are creating an end reader experience. It's basically the ways that we are then taking the content that is created in the content creation tools from my team and actually delivering that downstream for end readers. So it's our front end website designer called Page Builder. It is our web delivery. It is all of the complicated mechanisms that we are doing to deliver all of this content to over 2,000 sites around the world. It's the experience team. It's focused on building product for folks that are really focused on driving readership and audience engagement. Then the last part of the product organization is the platform team. And so their clients are often client developers. So it's, like I said, we're a a technology partner for our clients. So we're partnering with them. They're being provided our full suite of tools, but we also know that they have in-house development crews. And so the platform team is focused on building our APIs and the ways that our clients can engage with the back end of the products fundamentally. So it's kind of that back end infrastructure and architecture. So these three pillars, we all work together and deliver that unified vision across each of those teams. But each of those three pillars roll up to a senior person in the product organization who's leading that and responsible for that vision. And they similarly have engineering counterparts as well, who are focused on each of those three pillars too. Our product organization mirrors our engineering organization in that regard. So there's kind of partners all the way up the organization.
Yeah, excellent. I'm just drawing the picture in my mind as you go. So you've got the platform team, you've got content team, and then you've got the experience team. Mm-hmm. So the tools that you create, does anything ever go directly to, say, a user or customer without going through the experience team? Or is it all then it goes through the experience team?
It always goes through the experience team. That is a terrific question. So the way that we've oriented each of those pillars is based off of the users. So like I said, for my team, the content team, it's focused on the creators. It is focused on the people that are actually creating the content. The experience team is focused on the people that are delivering the content. So they're folks that are designers, they're folks that are editors managing what that front page of a website looks like. And then the platform team is for the infrastructure, architecture, development side of things for our clients in-house. I got the org chart in my head. So. But I think it's very clear, and I appreciate how clear it is. I think that we're oriented around our user groups. We're oriented around the needs of those user groups. And yes, we are the back end of a news article that you see online. I'm actually the space where a client is entering that information, where they're pulling in stories and videos and images and compiling what that looks like. Yeah. How that is actually rendered to an end reader is in fact controlled by another piece of software at ARC.
Yeah. Ultimately, it's the same underlying thing. It's just a different skin that people are putting on it based upon the particular customer. So you've got the experience, which is effectively designers and people who are presenting the information. You've got the content area, which is about the creators. And then you've got the platform area, which is about the internal tech teams and the much more technical aspect to it. And they're three very specific forms of users. And the way that I would surmise this is that you've created an organizational structure which is specializing in the user domain rather than the technical domain.
I mean, there is definitely some specialization in the technical domain as well, especially the platform team is very focused on, again, kind of back-end work.
But at the same time, but you've built it around a specific set of users.
Correct, yeah. Most of their users are client developers.
Yeah.
And so when I'm creating product-facing documentation or client-facing documentation, I am pulling together a lot of interface examples and videos about how you do something within the interface. Whereas I've got my counterparts who are working on the platform team, their client-facing documentation is API Swagger docs and things on GitHub documenting the different processes and ways that you can customize your client code to work with the systems that we have at ARC.
Yeah, and I suppose they are interfacing a lot with the stuff that comes from your area directly rather than the experience team. Yeah.
We're all very enmeshed, but there is kind of a structure along the way, I would say.
Yeah, no, it's making sense. Like some people may say, well, hold on a minute. The platform team, is it specializing in a user domain because it is very technical, but you just have technical users. If you've got a technical part of your product, then those users are going to be technical. You're still specializing in a domain. It just so happens it is a very technical domain. And I love that. I feel warm and fuzzy on the inside. Thank you very much for sharing it with me.
I have the same thoughts about it. I think it's a very well-structured organization.
Yeah, I like it. I also know that I could carry on talking about this for a long time, but I've kept you guys for a long time, chatting for a while. So I feel that maybe we should begin to bring this to a close. Is there anything that you would like to raise or talk about in the last kind of segment of our conversation?
I feel like you were chock full of questions there.
No, because I'm over here thinking to myself, because we're talking about like the way that ARC is structured and just the methodical approach that we designed, because we build it around a user experience. And it just takes me back to using design thinking and using those different types of tools to really build fantastic experiences for folks. And it's really cool because when you are a product manager or product owner in this space, having a organizational structure that supports you in the way that ARC does it allows the reduction in context switching, which I know for some people is a killer. And I just knowing that how deep you can really get into, especially with Jenny on your end, and seeing how you can really focus on composer, but then you can think about how does that experience plays with other different types of tools, right? But like how does it interact, especially when you think about composer and how does a photo present on this page? Or how do I bring particular pieces of what I want to show to a particular article, right? Because as a journalist, a lot of times, it's you think about the story, you think about what you want to tell, you think about what's the tone, what is the important facts that you need to know, right? But then also the way the tools are built out and the way we're structured, you can then also say that, oh yeah, as I am building this page, I know my photojournalist has this really great article about some Pyrenees mountains, and I am doing a Nat Geo story. You can then start to see how our organizational structure supports the way a user interacts with our tools, and it's just really cool and really awesome to see. Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me. And I'm going to piggyback on that, CP, because I think one thing that I like about the way that we've structured our teams is, again, we're meeting users where they are. And as a result, it means the users that are using my tool, the composers of the world, they are creating content. And so for them, things that are important are simplicity of use and speed. For especially if you are in a breaking news environment, you've got to get something out the door quickly. So I need to make my experience as efficient, seamless, frictionless as possible. What's interesting is, by contrast, let's say someone who is focusing on client developers, for them, flexibility is more important. So in my space in Composer, we don't want to oversaturate it with too much flexibility, lest we make it too confusing for somebody to be able to get something quickly out the door. So we've oriented around these different groups. And I think that's allowed us to focus on building greater user empathy. Similarly, with the experience team that's focused on the way that something is delivered to end readers, those are users that are typically more design savvy. Those are users that are a little more tech savvy than my users who are writers predominantly. So it means that those products are built a little differently and they're catered towards different skill sets, knowing that different users are often the ones engaging with them.
Awesome. That was a lovely experience. Thank you for taking the time to go through this. It feels
Thank
like
you, Ben. This is fun.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I guess when it works. And when it doesn't, I don't release the episode. So
hopefully we'll make it out there.
You'll make it.
Hopefully we will make the cut. We'll make the cut.
Like you have made the cut. Honestly,
there you go.
It's been brilliant. I've really enjoyed it. And I think there's so much gold there for people.
Any of those rapid fire?
Yeah, you want to rapid fire? We can get those in, yeah.
We could do it. We could do a quick yes, no.
Okay.
Jenny, you mentioned that sometimes customers develop their own features, their own customizations around the edge of ArcXP. Do those customizations ever then get factored back into the main product?
Yes. That was my quick yes, no answer.
Yeah, I like it. CP, what is the most useful tool or tip for coaching teams that are just remote, who you don't actually get to see in the work?
I do this a lot. Say this exact phrase. I trust you. That goes miles, because when you are explicitly saying trust, that empowers them to do the amazing work that they do. So I trust you. I cannot tell you how impactful that is.
Okay, and the last question. Since ArcXP has flourished into this huge SaaS platform, what's been the single most useful technique that's been introduced?
When you say technique, is it technique or something in the platform that we've used, or is it a tool that we've used?
Something that's transferable, something that the people listening could say, okay, right, that's been useful for them.
I've got a rather narrow focused one, but it's one that's interesting and top of mind. One thing that we recently started doing, we adopted a tool called Pendo, which allows us to embed in-app guides within the interface. And what we've leveraged that to do is to actually link out to surveys that we run on Maze, which allow us to upload prototypes and do some usability testing. So what we do is we will embed surveys within the product itself and then have users click out into those surveys. And then we will ask them, hey, now that you've given us some feedback, are you willing to get on a follow-up call with us? And for clients that do say that, we will reach out and chat with them. So I've got 3 client calls coming up after this based right off of that. So it's an incredible way for us to meet users precisely where they are in their workflow.
Beautiful. I've got a lot of time for Pendo. I like...
You like Pendo? You've used Pendo?
I'm aware of it. I got invited to their office opening in London, but couldn't make it because our trains are quite, what's the way to put it? They're a bit shit. And sometimes...
Honestly, superior to the US infrastructure?
Well, perhaps. Well, yes. And yours will be really shit. But around here, they're pretty shit. And you turn up to get a train. You're like, oh, okay. So I'm literally 30 miles outside of London. And some days you cannot get in on a train because they've closed all the platforms, or there's a badger on the line, or something else quintessential English. Someone's dropped a scone on the platform, that kind of thing, and you just can't get into London, so it makes it really difficult. So I missed the office opening, but no, one of my clients are really looking at Pendo. I think that if there are organizations that want to meet users where they are and want to actually use their product to help give them data and kick off some of the research, I think it's invaluable. But one of my other bees in my bonnet is the one thing that people were overly focused on was, what's our feature cycle time? And they used to measure their feature cycle time, about how long it took a feature to go out the door, and then it stopped. But what if no one used it? And I think actually, like the feature value cycle time, actually measuring the time when actually you can tell whether or not someone's using it and then stopping the clock. That's really interesting. And I think Pendo gives you an easy opportunity to say, oh, hold on, like someone is using this, or hold on, actually they've totally stopped before they were supposed to use it and gone somewhere else. Like, that's weird. So maybe that clock doesn't stop. I think that's a really useful metric. And I think that Pendo have plenty of other tools out there as well, help drive some of that decision making.
Yeah, the data is key. Just being able to see how users are actually engaging in the platform is mission critical to making data-driven decisions.
Sorry, I'll shut up. CP, did you say yours?
I have not, but I will make mine ridiculously quick. Mine is not necessarily a tool, it's more of a technique, and that is actually just portfolio management, just in general, right? And understanding the entire ecosystem and taking that 50,000-foot view. It's something that has been tremendously helpful. If folks want to learn more, and I'll plug, IC Agile has a really great course that's focused on lean portfolio management, which I think I strongly recommend for folks to take. All of my directs are taking it, and they have found it super useful, and that's something that we use within our world today. It just gives us that ability to economically view and see if the stuff that we're building, as you mentioned, maybe are the right things to build, and if they are delivering the value that we expect.
Thank you both so much for this. I can't wait to edit this one. It's going to be so much fun. So thank you, honestly, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for coming on.
What an episode. Well, what are 2 episodes? In the conversations with CP and Jenny, I learnt so much, and I think you probably have too. We've looked at, for me, one of the big issues that has never been addressed properly, and one of the reasons why I've decided to put so much effort into defining and really promoting what product agility is. It's creating a strong relationship between the agile world and the product world in an organization. Forming those partnerships that Jenny and CP are such keen advocates are. So thank you, CP, thank you, Jenny, and thank you for you to listening for this episode and the previous one. Now, next up, we have some exciting news. We're going to be welcomed by Jeff Watts for 3 episodes. Now, Jeff was one of the UK's, if not the UK's, first certified Scrum trainer. He's written some fantastic books on product mastery, Scrum mastery, and how to work well with teams. And he's going to be joining us for in-depth explorations into all things product, leadership, and agile coaching, spending quite a bit of time really focusing on some of the issues that exist in the agile certification industry. So do make sure you subscribe on your podcast platform of choice or the YouTube channel so you don't miss those episodes. I thank you once again for listening. My name is Ben Maynard, and this is the Product Agility Podcast.